mentioned in my Saints Row the Third review that I do have a lot of nostalgia for the GTA games. Despite everything I will say, they are something that I get a weird sense of joy from, Vice City and San Andreas being the two main games I played as a child. Not because the games themselves were amazing, Christ no, even back then I thought they had their issues, but playing them today I am reminded of my childhood in a weird way. I remember going over to my dad's on the weekend, hanging out with my cousin as we played the games using the cheat codes to completely break them. Every time a specific song comes on the radio I get this weird sentimental pang. I recently got a subscription to PlayStation Now.
Oh, nice. Is it good value for money?
Of course it is. It's PlayStation. Everything here is good.
Wait, that doesn't sound quite right.
Oh, piss off you two, honestly the jury's still out on this. But on the service I saw that GTA Vice City the Definitive Edition was available and I was curious to have a proper look at it, you know, without directly giving Rockstar any money. I didn't remember that I have a PS2 copy still lying around somewhere, and so I decided that we'll do another two-part episode. Part 1 will see us discussing GTA Vice City the Definitive Edition, Christ what a mouthful, on its own as a game, treating it as I would any other game release. Considering what they were charging for the free games at launch, I think this is an acceptable route to take. Part 2, however, will discuss how the game holds up compared to the original in terms of quality of life changes, graphics and anything else that comes to mind. So grab your tacky Hawaiian shirts and poorly modelled guns and let's take a holiday to Vice City.
Part 1, Part 1, Part 1, Part 1, Part 1, Part 1.
We play as Tommy, a mobster who is sent by Sunny, another more powerful mobster, to Vice City to expand their family's reach. We get there and engage in a drug deal that is ambushed by some random fucks. Our buddies get killed and we're left in the city without a penny or pill to our name. Our mate Sunny screams at us over the phone for losing the drugs and we basically promise the nutter that we'll get them back. The game is a third-person shooter stroke crime sandbox, though a bit thin on the ground when it comes to the sandbox activities, save for the few hidden packages around the map that you can find that apparently do something. I assume they do something. They wouldn't be here if they did nothing, that'd be silly. And the occasional phone mission you can pick up. There isn't really anything to do aside from the main missions. If you want, you can save the game and go nuts on a killing spree, but can I confess something to you? I never really felt like it.
Wait, you didn't ever get the urge to go on a kill spree in this GTA game? What's even the point?
Honestly, I don't know. It might have been fun to run over pedestrians from time to time in the game. I have to stress in the game, not in real life, that's fucking horrific. But the slippery-ass cars that seem to have no mass will spin out with the slightest collision, so it's not like it's sustainable fun. The gunplay isn't very good either. The weapons that could lock onto enemies, they're fine to use, but given that you're eventually given rifles that you need to manually aim, like the assault rifle and sniper, you will have to contend with the really stiff aiming controls. Here's some footage of me trying to line up a shot with the sniper rifle. Every time I try to move the slightest bit to line up the shot properly, the weapon swings way too far, so I have to get closer to a dude just to have any hope. Causing mayhem was only really fun when you have a tank. And the cheat codes do still apparently work on this game, but I'm trying to play without them, so I only really got my hands on the tank once. And then there's the issue that if you die in the game, you lose all the guns, swords and grenades that you might be carrying, which can lead to you having to ride up and down the map looking for the one shop that sells the exact gun that you need. My advice is to favour weapons like the pistol or the pump-action shotgun that can auto-aim, and then the sniper for long-range precision aiming. Most other guns just aren't worth it. I love me a light machine gun in a lot of games, but the one in Vice City is a manual aim deal that stops you dead in your tracks. It's a pain in the arse to use. It does some nice damage and is pretty accurate for what it is, but save for a couple of boss dudes. Most guns will put enemies down in between 1 to 3 shots, so it's not really a massive advantage to have a fully automatic weapon like that. So my desire to cause mayhem? Non-existent, at least in this game. Honestly, at this point, if I want to cause mayhem in a game, I will load up Saints Row 4 and play that for a bit. Sorry GTA, I feel like you've been outclassed here. You really can't compete to a game where I can fly around a city and shoot ice out my hands. When you start the game, you can only access one of the 3 islands, but after a few missions, the others are unlocked. What does this offer outside of story progression? Well, a couple of extra guns can be purchased from the shops. That's about it seems. I think a few extra car models spawned. I can't tell if that was actually true, if I just hadn't noticed them before. As I said, for a sandbox game, there isn't really anything to do. Say what you will about the arcade games and the gyms in GTA San Andreas, at least they were a thing to do. Hell, the gyms even raised your stats, so you could sprint for longer and not poop out like I do when I try to walk for more than 8 seconds. Vice City could be described then perhaps as a narrative-driven game with a more open-world approach. You can visit people in whatever order you choose to get stuff done, which means if there's a mission that is a pain in the arse, you can blow it off for a while. Speaking of missions, they're mostly pretty easy to do, I found. There isn't much of a sense of structured challenge, as enemies don't seem to get tougher as the game goes on. As I said earlier, aside from bosses, 1 to 3 bullets is all you really need for a dude. Enemies do get slightly better weapons, but between the lock-on and the sniper rifle, you probably won't get killed as often as the game thinks you will. And if you die in a mission, the penalty of losing all your weapons and being shoved to the nearest hospital is exchanged by the return to a checkpoint option.
Wait, I think I know where this is going. The checkpoint system takes the piss, and will have you basically replaying the entire mission with cutscenes, each and every time you fuck it up.
Exactly the issue. The one mission where you're assaulting a dude's mansion has the intro bit spliced up into about 4 separate cutscenes. Because part of the cutscene takes place inside the mansion and it's in-game, not pre-rendered, the game has to load the interior and then play the cutscene, so you can't even skip the whole bloody thing. And I'll be honest, it's not like the mission itself is much fun.
God! I remember this bollocks. Having to keep Lance alive when he seems to lack any sense of self-preservation. Wonder how the dude managed to walk downstairs without killing himself 9 fucking times.
Yep, it might as well be an escort quest that fails you because the brain dead tagalong doesn't know how to avoid the bullets. I do have some praise to offer though. The environment has a lot of little details in it that I really like, and it makes me respect the artists and programmers. Look, you might not care, but I enjoy driving around and taking in the scenes. There are plenty of environmental details that I enjoy seeing. Nothing is standout, I'm not saying that. It's just a competently modelled city and I'm impressed by it, I really am. It's got to be a thankless job having to render the roofs of buildings that half the players will never see. On its own, is the game good? I don't fucking know, viewer. It isn't a bad game. It runs well enough, only has a few bugs that I saw, and most of them were so minor I can't remember exactly what they were. The missions are interesting enough, I suppose. There is one rather infamous mission where you're supposed to pilot a small remote control helicopter to plant bombs around a building site. Apparently it's supposed to be frustrating as all hell, but I nailed it on my first try. So either I am the god queen of video games and now shalt bow to me, or maybe the controls are just better than they used to be, so the mission was more doable. Though that feels like a topic we should cover more in part 2. I liked how the map isn't overly large, so we don't have huge commutes between missions. I was a bit iffy about save points being tied to buyable in-game properties, at least until I had like several of them, so it was easy enough to just drive to one to save the game. Honestly, it's an okay video game by today's standards. If I remember correctly, the trilogy currently costs about 60 quid, so that's like 20 quid per game. Yeah, it's not really worth 20 quid if I'm being honest. A fiver maybe, tenner at a push, that's about it. But that's a discussion that we can continue in part 2. Oh fuck, this is hard to look at. So here we shall see how the definitive edition of the game compares to the original. Well, first things first, the definitive edition of Vice City is missing a lot of songs. Looking for the Perfect Beat by Africa Bambaataa and the Soul Sonic Force, Herbie Hancock's Rocket, Irake's Anunga Nuga, I'm fairly certain I've mispronounced that, I'm sorry if I did, Kate Bush's Wow, Michael Jackson's Billie Jean, and Wanna Be Startin' Something, Ozzy Osbourne's Bark at the Moon, and Tyrone Brunson's The Smurf. Though I am given reason to believe that it's the cunts that run the music industry that are the reason why we didn't see the return of these songs, not necessarily Rockstar themselves, so you can't really blame them for that, I guess. Though on a personal note, I should admit, I don't really care about any of these. I don't remember any of those songs, because I exclusively listen to the Encanto soundtrack, but it does still mean that the game is ultimately less value for your money. Moving away from the butchering of the radio stations, let's look at how the game controls compared to the original. Well, old school Vice City made controlling Tommy headache-inducing. The camera is awful and the movement manages to be way too stiff yet overly sensitive. In the definitive edition, we solve these. Tommy controls a bit smoother and the camera is a bit more focused. Driving in the old school GTA games was always done with one button, the X button if you're a PlayStation person, I think it's the A button if you're Xbox, which meant speed control was more of an issue, so I am glad that the definitive edition is solved for that as well. We now use the controller triggers for driving, which feels much nicer, though the cars still feel like they have no weight to them whatsoever and will spin out at the slightest tap, which can be frustrating as fuck. And something else that really bugs me about these games is that cars on the road will just turn without any fucking warning. Moving on. Aiming feels a bit more reliable in this game as well. Obviously both games offer an auto-target option for some guns, but those guns that you have to manually aim, they're a lot better in the definitive edition, I'll say that much. Though I still highly recommend you stick to the auto-target ones for your close to mid-range shooting.
Ronica, maybe it's time to address the elephant in the room.
Yeah, I guess I can't put it off forever, can I? Original GTA Vice City looks like this. I think I've had nightmares that looked more appealing. GTA Vice City, the definitive edition, which Rockstar have had years and years to work on and virtually limitless funding, when you consider the fact that GTA 5 is the single most profitable piece of entertainment media, looks like this.
Jesus fuck! That looks hideous! What did they spend that time doing?
God only knows, Vera, God only knows. GTA Vice City the Definitive Edition looks horrible. If it came out in the early 2010s, it might have been forgivable, but Jesus.
What gets me is this isn't a remake or a remaster, it's the Definitive Edition. This is apparently the way the game was meant to be. This. Just how? How must the PS5 feel running this crap?
About as good as I thought running this crap.
Yikes! What was the point in you again?
So at the end of the day, we're left with nothing more than a slightly more playable version of a game that originally released 20 years ago. This is just apparently the definitive edition of that game. This is exactly what it was meant to be. Let that sink in, viewer. The conclusion!
The end bit.
Get on with it!
Is Grand Theft Auto Vice City the Definitive Edition a good game? Not really. Its whole thing has been done better over the years, and all it really brings to the table is some admittedly pleasant nostalgia for me. The story was acceptably entertaining, I suppose. But overall, by today's standards, it's a really poorly designed game. Did I have fun with it? I mean, I had a bit of fun here and there. I kind of enjoyed some of the missions, but I reached a point where I was like, yeah, that's enough now, and I stopped playing. I do sort of vaguely remember how it all ended anyway, though truth be told, I do have better things to do than try to recall the final scene of a 20-year-old video game. Shut up, I do. GTA Vice City, the D edition, D, get it? Like Dolores, isn't a very good game, but isn't even close to worth the asking price that Rockstar set up. I bought the original Vice City and San Andreas on my PlayStation for about £3 a pop, and that's a more acceptable price for games this old. Say what you will, I just don't think they hold their value. And then also consider the fact that these games actually have less content due to the whole song thing, and therefore they're worth even less. So at the end of the day, what are we really left with? 3 20-year-old games that are somehow worth 20 quid each, which no, they are not. You used to be able to buy the original PS2 versions of these games, not anymore, at least on the PlayStation Store, not since Rockstar released the Definitive Edition. It's almost like they knew the game wasn't worth much, and that fans would be better off buying the older versions of the games, so they had to quickly whack them and make sure the Definitive Edition was the only game in town. Rather fitting, really. GTA Vice City, the Definitive Edition, just isn't really worth the money you'll pay for it. If you've got PlayStation now, I say go ahead and play it, otherwise don't bother, it ain't worth buying. Alternatively, just buy a Saints Row game, they're much better.